Okay, so in this video, we're going to do more of the same questions that we did in the last video, but they're just slightly trickier, so you need to just take your time a little bit more with them. So in the last video, we were looking at solving quadratic equations, and remember, solving means you find x equals something else, or x equals a certain number. So there was three types of quadratic equations we did, and we're going to look at the same three types, but they're just given to you in a different way. So here's an example of one, 5x squared equals 0. An example of another one would be 25x squared minus 256 equals 0. And an example of another one would be 3x squared plus 7x minus 20 equals 0. So first one looks like a very simple equation, and there's actually two ways you can solve this, but I'll show you the way that we kind of did the last lesson as well. So in the last lesson we had blank plus blank equals 0, but the only difference with this equation is it's not rearranged, or it's not arranged in that way. So the first thing we want to do is we want to move everything to one side of the equal to sign, and how we do that is we take away 7x from both sides, and we're left with 5x squared minus 7x equals 0. Now it's set up like the last question, or the question we did in the last video. So what we want to do is we want to factorize the left hand side of this equation. So looking at this, can we use difference of two squares? No. So we want to look for a common factor in both 5x squared minus 7x. And that common factor is just x, because nothing else goes into both 5 and 7. So if we take x out of 5x squared, we're left with 5x. If we take x out of minus 7x, we're left with minus 7. And all that equals 0. Now remember how we solved these, how we finished them. We have some number x multiplied by another number, 5x minus 7 equals 0. So that means that one of those numbers at least must equal to 0. So we have two possible solutions here. We could say x equals 0, or 5x minus 7 equals 0. If 5x minus 7 equals 0, what's the value of x? So we add 7 to both sides. Now we're left with 5x equals 7. Divide both sides by 5. 5's cancel. So x equals 7 over 5. And you can leave your answer like that. You can leave it like a fraction. So there's your two possible answers for the first one. And you just make sure that you have it nice and clear, and you write down that x equals 0 or x equals 7 over 5. So we now look at the second example. So can we use the same method of factorization for this? Is there a number that goes into both 25x squared and 256? And there's not. 5 doesn't go into both of them, and you can check there's no other numbers. So we need to look for a different method. And the different method we're going to look for is maybe difference of two squares. So is 256 a square number? Well, you can do a quick check with that by just typing square root of 256 into your calculator. And if you do, you get an answer of 16. So yes, it is a square number. So when we write this out again, looking at the square numbers, 25x squared would be the same as 5x all squared, minus 256 would be the same as 16 squared equals 0. How we finish factorizing this is that's the same as 5x minus 16 multiplied by 5x plus 16 equals 0. And just remember what we're doing here when we're factorizing. We could work backwards, and if we multiply all of this out again, we multiply these two brackets out again, it will give us 25x squared minus 256. So again, we have two numbers. One multiplied by the other equals 0. So that gives us two options. 5x minus 16 can equal 0, or, I'll put it down here so there's more room, 5x plus 16 can equal 0. And now we just solve both of these equations for x. So I'll look at the top one first. If we want to get x, we add 16 to both sides of the equation. They cancel. We're left with 5x equals 16. Divide both sides by 5. X equals 16 divided by 5. And you can leave your answer like that. Looking at the second one, same way of doing things. Oh, why am I minus and 17? Minus 16 on both sides. They cancel. So 5x equals minus 16 this time, so x is going to equal minus 16 over 5. And there's our two possible solutions for this question. So that's just difference of two squares again, but it's slightly trickier because we have bigger numbers basically, and we don't have just an x squared, we have 25x squared. So remember, 25x squared is 5x all in brackets squared. Let's look at the last example. So the difference between this example and the example in the last video is we have a coefficient of x squared. In other words, we have a number in front of x squared. And when this is the case, remember, we have to write 3x in one of our brackets and x in the other bracket when we're factorizing. And whatever number goes down here will get multiplied by 3. And whatever number goes in here will get multiplied by 1. And both of those numbers have to add up to give us plus 7. So we'll solve it the same way we do the other ones. So we have minus 20 here. So we get the factors of minus 20. So just get the factors of 20 first. So we have 4 times 5 equals 20. So we could have minus 4 times plus 5 gives us minus 20. Or we could have 4 times minus 5 gives us minus 20. We could have 10 times 2. So let's say minus 10 times 2 gives us minus 20. Or 10 times minus 2 gives us minus 20. What else? Well, we could have 20. Minus 20 times 1 gives us minus 20. Or 20 times minus 1 gives us minus 20. So now we have to pick which two of these we can add together to give us plus 7. Now remember, we have a minus and a plus number, so we have to take that into account as well. So I'm thinking it's going to be 4 and 5, because 3 times 4 would be 12, and if we take 5 away from 12 we get 7. So we want a plus number, so 3 times 4 will give us 12, and if we take 5 away from that we will get 7. So our 4 goes in there, and that's going to be a plus, and this will be a minus, equals 0. And you can just check that. 3x multiplied by 4 gives us 12x, minus 5 multiplied by x gives us minus 5x. Sorry, I know it's a bit messy. 12x minus 5x is plus 7x, so that works out. So now don't forget to finish the question. We have our two factors now, and we know that one of these numbers must be equal to 0, or at least one of these numbers. So 3x minus 5 could equal 0, or x plus 4 could equal 0, because in order for the product of these numbers to equal 0, at least one of them has to be 0. So we have 3x minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0. And to solve the equation, or to finish the question, we just have to solve both these equations. So to solve for x on this one, we'll plus 5 to both sides, and we're left with 3x equals 5. Divide both sides by 3, x equals 5 over 3. And you can leave your answer as a fraction unless they ask you otherwise. On this side, if we want to get x, it's a bit easier. just take away 4 from both sides. X equals -4. And there's our two answers. So play the video again, pause it when you need to pause it, and don't be afraid to ask me any questions in the comment section on Teams.